words, when he said, we've captured a flying saucer, he was telling the truth. And when he backed off and followed orders and said, no, it was just a weather balloon, he was following orders. So he gets promoted. That's the way it works. Now, when all of this came about 1996 or so, the Air Force finally issued this report, the Roswell report, stamped case closed. Does that sound familiar? They always say case closed. This is the final word. And in their background they say, this comprehensive further examination of the so-called Roswell incident found no evidence whatsoever of flying saucer, space aliens, citizen government cover-up. By the way, that's interesting. They use the same verbiage as the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission never said there was no conspiracy to kill Kennedy. What they said over and over and again was, we could find no evidence of conspiracy. And of course they didn't, because they didn't go look for it. In fact, they systematically turned away and didn't look at any evidence supporting the conspiracy. Same thing here. We could find no evidence of space aliens. Well, of course not. You can't get to it. Barry Goldwater tried to go to Wright-Patterson and see if he could get in to view the space aliens. They wouldn't even let him in. You think they're going to let the guys writing this report in? But here's the clincher. By the time this report came out, they changed their story again. They said, okay, it really wasn't a weather balloon. We lied about that because it was a secret mogul balloon. Now, the mogul balloon was not even secret. A mogul balloon was a weather balloon, basically. The only thing classified about mogul was that it carried this very sensitive testing equipment into the upper atmosphere to test, and they were testing to see if the Soviets were setting off nuclear weapons. Now, don't ask me why they thought they had to send up balloons from New Mexico to see what the Soviets in Russia were setting off, when they could have sent those balloons off from Turkey or Japan or any number of places, much closer to the Soviet Union. Because I don't know, and they never explained. But, so the only thing secret and classified about the mogul balloons was simply the information, the software that they were carrying. I might also point out that in one book written by a very pro-mogul balloon explanation for Roswell, he went a little overboard, and he actually gave every little statistical bit of information about the mogul balloon, and he pointed out that of 22 releases of these mogul balloons, they only recovered 8. Why such a low number? Because, as he pointed out himself, they didn't bother to go look for any more. Well, how classified is that? You don't even bother to go look for them. But then that didn't really satisfy anybody, so by 1997 they had added something else, and that was crash dummies. What they saw was crash dummies. Now, here's a picture, and by the way, this is Raymond Matson right here, with his arm around one of the crash dummies. He was part of the crash dummy program, and I talked to Mr. Matson, and he laughed at the whole idea that what they had seen in 1947 was crash dummies, because as you can obviously see, they look like humans, they weigh the same as humans. It only makes sense if you're testing parachutes or ejection seats or whatever. You don't want a little 4-foot alien-looking guy. You want some guy that weighs and looks like a human. Plus, he said that you wouldn't have any trouble identifying them. He said because one of the problems they had was that when they parachute these crash dummies out, the wind currents would catch them and scatter them all over the countryside. So they said on front and back they had a big stencil that says, property of U.S. Air Force, $25 reward if you'll bring you back in, you know. None of that was found on whatever it was they found at Roswell. But here's the clincher. Obviously you can see there's a whole lot of difference between a 4-foot big-headed alien and a 6-foot, 200-pound crash dummy. But in this same Roswell report, where they're trying to tell us it's just crash dummies, they thoughtfully gave us a listing of the high-altitude balloon dummy drops. The very first one took place on June the 23rd, 1954. Now that leads me to recall when they had a press conference in summer of 1997, and Colonel Johnson got up and explained that what they had seen was crash dummies. And then he began to and commenced to show some old news footage of the crash dummies and some of the planes that were carrying them. And after he got through with his presentation and went to questions from the media, one of the more astute reporters said, Colonel Johnson said, you're telling us this is what they saw in 1947, said, but you're showing us data and photographs that are obviously from the 1950s and 60s. And they came back to Johnson. You know what he said? I remember his words distinctly. He said, well, I really don't know what they saw in 1947. And I thought, well, then why are you having this news conference? Yeah. And why are we listening to you? But this is what's going on, folks. And, of course, here's General Ramey right here with his weather officer holding some weather balloon debris. And I talked to Bon Johnson, who was a photographer for the Star-Telegram at that time, and he is convinced because he was there. They started to let them in. They suddenly pushed them all out of the room, held them around for a while, then let them back in, and here was Ramey, and here was the weather guy with this junk, and it didn't look like the same stuff they'd seen the first time. And he is still, to this day, convinced that they swapped the wreckage for this balloon debris, okay? But another thing is that when they allowed these pictures to be made of them holding the balloon wreckage, you notice in Ramey's hand is a telegram. Now, this is a picture that was published in a book, and it's, you know, third, fourth generation and out of the book and pretty hazy, but they've gotten hold of an original print of this, and thanks to computer digitization, they were able to blow up this telegram to the point to where they can read some of the words on it. And it says bodies, crash site, retrieval, okay? Something very totally different than the story that it was just a crashed weather balloon. Of course, in 1947, General Ramey would have never, in his wildest dreams, thought that in the future that high school kids would have computers and could analyze this photograph enough to be able to read the message on the telegram. Amazing. So now, though, here's a partial list of people who have now spoken out and said, I was there, I saw the debris, I picked up the bodies, I carried the bodies to Roswell Army Air Force, I put them in boxes, I guarded the boxes, I loaded the boxes on aircraft, I flew the aircraft to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, yada, yada, yada. So, and also we now have documents that have now given us a pretty good view of what actually happened, including July the 3rd, radar stations in that's West Texas, White Sands Proving Ground, tracked two identified aircraft until both dropped off radar. The two crash sites have been located close to White Sands Proving Ground. Site landing zone 1 was located at a ranch near Corona, approximately 75 miles northwest of the town of Roswell. Site landing zone 2 was located approximately 20 miles southeast of the town of Socorro at latitude 33, 40, 31, longitude blah, blah, blah. So in other words, there were two crash sites. Now this accounts for some of the confusion. People have argued, oh, it was at Corona, and others have argued, no, it was at Roswell. What apparently happened was this is all part of the same crash. The thing hit the ground, bam, and lost a lot of debris. This was the debris field. But then the major portion of it, or at least the flight compartment, the command deck, ricocheted and went way on over and ended up in a gully near Socorro. And this is reportedly where the bodies were found. So that's caused confusion, the fact that they've argued over, was it this crash site or that crash site, and actually it's all part of the same crash. Interestingly enough, and this document is dated 1947, on arrival at Landing Zone 2, that would be the command module, personnel assessed the finds as not belonging in aircraft, rocket, weapons, or balloon tests that are normally conducted from surrounding bases. First reports indicated the first crash investigators from Roswell that Landing Zone 1 was the remains of an Army Air Force top secret mogul balloon. So originally they thought it was a mogul balloon. But when scientists from